Good afternoon. We're so pleased to be gathered around this digital table for this learning series inspired by the Burkina DryMore program. The Burkina DryMore program was a 4-year dried mango diversification program, which was implemented in Burkina Faso and sponsored by the Embassy of the Netherlands. I'm very proud to have been on that wild journey from the very beginning, from concept development phase. And so it's just wonderful that we've been able to close that off. I am Kerry, a senior partner at Sense and your host for today's session. If you don't know Sense, we're a development firm with a foundation in technical studies, but thanks to our implementation unit, we've been delivering various implementation projects across Africa, and you'll find our offices in Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, via our partner, ABASF, some established offices in Ireland and South Africa, a representation in Germany, and breaking news, if you haven't heard it, we've recently launched an office in Malawi where we are delivering a 5-year program, delivering a food safety and processing desk. Tessa, one of the guests on the panel today, and myself, we've been quite instrumental in that project. So as a quick reminder, this is a final session in our 3-part series. Since the summer of last year, the European summer, we've explored a number of different topics, starting with preventing the white elephant, which focused on the realities of introducing new equipment in processing plants in Africa. We then moved on to looking at change management and how we could drive companies through change in order to achieve some of these lofty developmental goals that we have. And today we turn our attention to what I think is one of the more exciting topics. It's one I've got great passion for. It's navigating market access challenges for African entrepreneurs, lessons from the Burkina DryMore Project. Now, if you are Francophone, we would invite you to turn on your captions. It will enable you to get French captions. You do that by clicking on the Show Captions button, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen, and that will immediately allow you to select the language of your preference. In this case, if you're Francophone, French, or you can choose another language, for example, German, Dutch. In fact, there are too many languages to actually list. Now, before we get into this important topic, I thought it would be quite interesting for us to cover a couple of did you knows. You know, in preparing, I myself was surprised by some did you knows about trade, about market access in Africa. So you should now have on your screen a slide which, you know, really just brings it to life. Did you know that Africa's agribusiness sector could be worth $1 trillion by 2030? I couldn't even remember how many noughts that is. It's exceptionally large. Of course, we have an incredibly large continent. But as I have been working on various implementation projects, I have been really surprised to discover a couple of very interesting facts. Like, did you know that if you are picking up a pack of dried mango in the European Union, chances are it's from Burkina Faso. A few years ago, Burkina Faso overtook South Africa as being the largest supplier of dried mango to the European Union, in part thanks to donor-funded projects from the World Bank, which we were very proud to be a part of. Some other interesting facts that as you move into Valentine's Day next month, if you buy your partner a box of chocolates, chances are it's come thanks to cocoa sourced in Africa, where 75% of the world's cocoa is sourced. A couple of years ago, I did a study for the Dutch embassy in Senegal when I was quite surprised to discover that if you're enjoying some summer vegetables, European summer vegetables like radishes, even things like tomatoes or baby sweet corn over the Christmas period, chances are that was sourced in Africa, probably from Senegal, Kenya, or Egypt. Isn't that remarkable? You know, we play a role in so many different countries' foodstuffs without realizing it. And I think as Africans, we've probably seen the trucks moving across borders, taking onions from Niger down to the coastal regions. Tomatoes follow similar routes. But imagine what will happen when we eventually get the African Continental Free Trade Agreement up and running, where we could boost Africa's intra-trade by 50%, we can see that being able to access markets in a reliable fashion could be really significant for our development. And then finally, I think, Africa holds 65% of the world's uncultivated arable land. Think about the remarkable potential we have to play in world trade, in helping people to eat more nutritious, better food, more diversified diets. And I think for me, what I've come to discover is that there is a host of discovered and undiscovered products in Africa. We know of so many of them from Asia and from South America, but more recently, we've been working on projects in dried ginger, which get used in a range of different products, everything from medicines to the spices that you eat, fonio, which we'll touch on today, a unique grain to Africa, hibiscus, which flavors herbal teas. These are all ingredients that come from Africa and have the potential to help us with achieving some of our development goals. So yes, indeed, there is great potential for Africa, and you can see that market access is crucial. If we want companies or individuals to invest in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, they have to move out of a situation where they feel desperate to one where they feel they're thriving, because it's then that we can invest in better working conditions, in communities, in achieving gender equality. Market access truly matters. Now, I'm not going to be talking at you for the next hour and a half. I'm joined by 3 excellent guests who are going to be able to help us understand this topic from different angles. Right, let me first introduce you to Nick Salter. He has joined us from the UK, where he works on introducing a superfood brand and baobab fruit producer. Apologies, Nick. Aduna, he's a co-founder of that business. They import various African produce into the European Union, and so he is very well placed to share with us the perspective of a buyer who's going to be importing product to the European Union. So give us a wave, Nick, and we'll be able to introduce you a little bit later. We're also joined, and I'm so pleased to see in person and via video, Olia Ouedraogo. She joins us as the marketing manager from ABASF. It's a company that we're so proud to do work with as part of the CBI program. They export dried mango to the European Union. She has done a remarkable job in helping that company transition, achieve market access reliably, and I think they're just absolute superstars. So we're going to hear a little bit later from Olia, if you can give us a bit of a wave, Olia, who shares some of her experience as a company who's had to make that change. We're also joined by my colleague, Tessa Niemak. She's an important pillar of our project implementation unit. I think Tessa's constantly showing us how we can do better and bigger things. She led the market access for Sense in the Burkina DryMore program. And she will help us to understand the perspective from development practitioners. And hopefully we'll get some very workable, practical advice to help us to shape better, stronger programs. So give us a wave, Tessa. Welcome. And finally, we always make a big deal about our panelists, but I have to say we're also very pleased, very proud and honored to have our most valued guests of all, you, the participants, dialing in from around the world. I really welcome you to participate by sharing your comments in the chat function. Make sure that you put up your questions, share your perspectives. I think that together we can create a far more valuable webinar for all of us. Now, before we begin and we invite Nick to present, Nick, it's worthwhile you getting yourself a little bit ready. I think it's worthwhile us just laying a firm foundation on this concept of market access. When we talk about market access, it could actually be many things, but for the purposes of this webinar, we are focusing specifically on the aspects of market access that relate directly to African entrepreneurs. We're not talking about policy, we're not talking about trade agreements, we're not even talking about sectors working together to overcome regulatory hurdles so that they get access to markets. We're talking about what companies can themselves reliably do to attract new customers, to close deals, and then convert those customers into loyal buyers. So I think that that's quite empowering. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Nick to share with us some reflections on why he, as an under company, why have they decided to source from Africa? What are some of the successes and failures that they're seeing? Some advice that he might have for other companies, both importers and to African exporters. So over to you, Nick.
Okay, let me share my screen. That okay?
Perfect.
Super, super. Right. Well, hello, everybody. So as Kerry was saying, my name is Nick Salter from Aduna. We're a company based in London in the UK. I'm going to talk a little bit about a very short intro to the company. Then I want to give a very brief overview of Fonio, which is how Aduna and Sense got to work together. And then going to talk about some of the opportunities and most importantly, the challenges of buying ingredients from Africa. And when I talk about Africa, I do talk about it in a very generic sense. I'm very conscious of the fact that we're talking about, over 50 countries here. And there's a very big difference between South Africa and Sierra Leone and Burkina Faso and Sudan. Each country has its own characteristics and its own challenges, etc. But I'm going to talk about Africa in a fairly generic context. So how did I actually get involved in all of this in the first place? Well, I'll explain. Back in 2008, I was in the aviation industry, and I was at a seminar in Dakar in Senegal, and I came down from my hotel room to breakfast one morning, and I was served this drink that's called bouillie. And bouillie, for those that have not heard of it, is a drink that is made of water and milk powder and a little bit of sugar and baobab fruit. And I knew about the trees, but I had no idea what baobab fruit was. I didn't know that it existed, but I did know that the drink tasted very nice. And I ordered another one. And after my second one, I thought to myself, well, we've got a product here that I can't buy at home, but is absolutely delicious. And when I looked deeper into it, not only did I find that it was delicious, but it also had a lot of health properties. And if a market could be created for it, it would offer a good chance of environmental impact and social impact. And that was really the start of my journey and the start of how Aduna as a concept was born. This was back in 2012. So Aduna as a company today has got three pillars, I guess. The first is we are a consumer brand. So if you went onto aduna.com, what you would see is superfood products in the main, packed in pretty pouches. And we have a range of superfood ingredients. We have a range of teas, oils, various different things. And we're mostly sold in bricks and mortar retail stores, but also online. But that's the consumer brand, and the consumer brand is our main vehicle for getting products out into the market. The second thing that we do is act as a bulk ingredient supplier. So we specialize in just 4 ingredients: baobab, moringa, hibiscus, and fonio, which we'll talk about in a second. And those ingredients we would supply through to ingredient manufacturers, ingredient suppliers, food brands, competitors, anybody that's distributing ingredients. And a lot of that can be exported from Africa to the UK and then re-exported to other countries internationally. And then the third element, which is important for today's discussion is we are also a baobab fruit producer. So harking back to my experience in Dakar in 2008, from sipping a glass of bouillie, we're now harvesting between 1,000 and 1,500 tons of baobab fruit every year, processing them in northern Ghana on the Ghana-Burkina Faso border and exporting the baobab fruit powder to the UK. And through that process, we have had successes and failures and learned an awful lot along the way. And some of what I've learned over the past 12 years or so, I want to bring into today's conversation. I should mention as well, importantly, that our business model is really around trying to create demand through utilizing Africa's unknown ingredients. There are, as Kerry was mentioning earlier, there are so many underutilized ingredients, and it's a real opportunity for Africa and indeed consumers to be able to bring these sorts of products to market. So it's this combination of social and environmental impact with commercial opportunity. So not dissimilar to baobab in many ways in terms of its overall newness to Western markets is fonio. Fonio is part of the millet family. It's the smallest grain in the millet family. And the Dogon tribe in Mali know it as the seed of the universe. The belief there is that the universe was created through one small seed of fonio. It's Africa's oldest grain. It's a staple for about 12 million people in West Africa. The home of fonio is Guinea, but it grows in many of the other countries surrounding Guinea, so Senegal, Mali, Burkina. As I say, a staple for many, many people. From a Western perspective, or from a Western consumer perspective, it's a grain which would compete directly with couscous, with quinoa, anything that you would use rice or couscous or quinoa with. You can most certainly use fonio. It absorbs sauces and flavors very well. It was voted by the Ancient Grains Council in the US as the tastiest of all the ancient grains, which is a good accolade to have. Importantly, it's gluten-free. We have the fonio that we sell here in the UK. We have certified by the Celiac Society, so it's promoted to anybody that is intolerant to gluten. As I say, competes with rice and couscous, but very importantly, one of its key selling factors is that it cooks in less than 3 minutes. So you've got a tasty, nutritious, gluten-free grain. Absolutely no reason why it shouldn't be in every supermarket in every country around the world. Wherever rice and quinoa is sold, absolutely no reason why fonio can't be sold. It's just got that small challenge that most people don't know what it is. And that's the journey that we have to go on to be able to popularize it. And over the past few years, we've been working with Sense on fonio to be able to develop that value chain. So there's a lot of parallels, as I say, between products like fonio and baobab. And whenever you do launch a new product onto the market, whether it's a food, whether it's anything else, it has to effectively suit one of three criteria. Either it has to be improved on something that's existing. So if it's a food, it's going to have a better flavor than something that exists. It's going to have more vitamins and minerals than something else that exists. It's going to have a better color. To be able to succeed in the market, there has to be an improvement over something that's existing. So that's the first. If you haven't got that, the second alternative is it has to be cheaper. So something that's less expensive than something that's already being sold elsewhere. And if you can produce at a cheaper price, you stand a good chance. And then your third opportunity, which is really where Fonio comes in, is something that's new or different or unknown. And Fonio and Baobab both fulfill that criteria. But that presents its own demands. And what I want to do now is to discuss some of those challenges. So the three key challenges that I've listed, there are plenty more than three, but for expediency, I've just listed three of them. But the first of those is what we call demand creation. We were the first company in the UK to introduce Baobab into Western markets. It wasn't imported at all until we started. And fairly confidently, I think we thought in the beginning, nobody's done this before. There's no market for Baobab yet. We've got a blank sheet of paper. We've got no competitors. What could possibly go wrong? And actually getting it on the market as a new ingredient was quite easy. And I can remember in the very early days, we had one SKU, one product, which was Baobab powder in a small tub. And I had it in my case, and I'd be wandering around the various stores in London saying that you don't know me, you don't know my company, you don't know this product, but I'd like to try and get it on your shelf. And retailers were actually very open to something that was new. You know, they wanted to they want to have something that's different, something that their consumers hadn't seen before. And it wasn't that difficult to be able to get their buy-in. Again, when we went to distributors, and we would go to a distributor and say, we'd like you to be able to promote and distribute this product to your retailers, we also got a good reception. The distributors were very happy to be able to add something new to their inventory and to be able to offer it to their retailer customers. And before long, we had sold quite a decent proportion of the Baobab that we originally imported. But then came the real challenge, and the real challenge lies with the consumer, because it's all very well getting these products on the shelf, but you have to get the customer, that's us, to be able to take them off the shelf, to look at them, to understand what they are, to buy them, and to take them home. And not only have they got to do that once, they've got to do that again and make repeat purchases. Because if they don't make those repeat purchases, then the value chain is not going to work. And when I talk about a value chain, it is literally a chain. So you will start with the harvester or the farmer in Africa, and you'll then have the processor, the exporter, the brand that possibly makes the purchase, going out to a distributor and then to a retailer, and ultimately to a consumer. And if the consumer doesn't buy, then the value chain doesn't work. So actually promoting and getting these products out there and known to consumers is just as important as working on the sharp end of in the African context itself. Otherwise, the whole thing doesn't work. And you do see this with a lot of ingredients that get stuck in what we call the vicious cycle of obscurity, which is that there is no market awareness because there is no product development. And then there is no product development because there is no market awareness. And so it goes round and round, and somebody has to break that. And you tend to find that it's the smaller companies like ourselves who are the ones that are invested in wanting to try to make this work, but don't necessarily have the funds to be able to create the million-dollar campaigns that are possibly required to be able to make these ingredients popularized to as many people as possible. But we do have things like social media in our armory, which are very useful these days in being able to get out to a lot of people. But I don't want to, we shouldn't underestimate the importance of demand creation, because it's absolutely fundamental in the success of a value chain. And sometimes it can be a blind spot from a donor perspective, where a lot of cash and funds are pushed towards developing the market on the ground, you know, training women to grow something, purchasing machinery, all the infrastructure that's required around that, and then expecting the market to just arrive out of the blue and purchase the product. And there are all sorts of projects around Africa that have not succeeded, not because the idea wasn't good and not because the on-the-ground inputs weren't good, but because people hadn't thought in any great detail about who was going to buy the resulting ingredients in the first place. So market demand and demand creation is something that you really have to think hard about, and how it's going to work to be able to make sure that any on-the-ground activity is a success in the first place. The second challenge is around the buyer. And this is an overall perception of African business, or African businesses as businesses to be able to buy from. There is a saying that Africa doesn't need more businesses. What Africa needs is more business. There are countless, hundreds of thousands of small businesses across the continent, all ready to transact with international buyers, but there is a reluctance on the part of a lot of buyers, I see, in terms of engaging with African businesses. And this can be for so many different reasons. One is just that, as I've just touched on, so many small producers. How do you develop a relationship and choose the small producer that you're going to engage with? Questions, rightly or wrongly, around quality control and standards. You do find that a lot of African producers are producing for their local market. And when I say local, that could be the town or the city down the road, or they might be producing for the national market, or indeed it could be the cross-border market, but it's an African market rather than the European or the US market, for example. And to sell into those markets is a little bit more complicated, and from a buyer's perspective, that can often be off-putting. There's an unfamiliarity with European standards. So do the products that are being sold, the ingredients that are being sold, actually meet standards in the first place? That can be off-putting for buyers. Rightly or wrongly, security risks, definitely more applicable to West Africa. Language, you end up with adding all these various different things together, and the buyers will often say to themselves, well, this is just too much like hard work. Let's buy elsewhere and let somebody else do it. So it's this perception that we have to change as well. And we have to make it easy and simple and straightforward for buyers to want to access the market in the first place. And then the other challenge is at the producer level. And I've written down here, farmers versus food businesses. It seems that everyone in Africa seems to have a piece of land. Everyone is a farmer. There's tens of millions of farmers who all have a piece of land, who are all growing something, who could all sell you something in some shape or form. But the farmer part and the harvester part is only one element of it. if you're producing a crop, at some stage, usually that crop is going to have to be processed somewhere. And although there's a lot of experience perhaps in the farming and harvesting, there is not nearly enough experience in food processing, in food manufacturing and food standards. And it's this gap between the farming and the harvesting and the growing and the processing. And if you're wanting to do it at scale, in other words, produce containers of product, processing to European and US standards. There's the knowledge required around navigating and understanding the various different EU standards and regulations, quite a complex area, particularly if you're looking at organic, and organic does tend to be not a prerequisite, but it's certainly preferred for a lot of these newer ingredients. People want to be able to buy an organic product rather than a conventional product. There's a lack of export knowledge. There's a lack of knowledge around HACCP and food certification, microbiology analysis, pesticides analysis, heavy metals analysis, and so on. All these various different tests that need to be done to make sure that a product is fit for market in the first place and can be sold in Western markets. There's a lot more that needs to be done around market presence and market knowledge. So it's all very well having a fantastic crop that you can sell, but who do you sell it to? And how do you access that market? And do you have a website? Are you able to link and connect with businesses? Are you familiar with the landscape of exhibitions and food fairs internationally, etc., etc.? Is this something you've ever done before and have an understanding of how to go about it? And crucially, of course, have you got the working capital to be able to make it happen in the first place? Because of course you're going to need some cash if you're going to be able to make your business stand out and be able to be successful in international markets. And again, this can often be a difficulty in donor funding, where it's not so much an issue of the funds not being available or out there to be able to apply for, but a lot of donors are looking for $1 million project or a $5 million project, whereas a small African entrepreneur may very well simply need, $25,000 or $50,000 to be able to get their business off the ground. And unless it's available in those smaller chunks, then it can be difficult to access. So those are three of the challenges that I've listed out: the demand creation, the perception from buyers outside Africa that Africa is difficult to deal with, and then at the producer level, primarily farmers farming and harvesting rather than being food processors. There's many more challenges than that, but those are three to be getting on with. But there's opportunities as well. And one of the biggest opportunities, and this is something that Kerry touched on a second ago, is the wealth of unique ingredients that Africa has. I said at the beginning, when you're launching a new product, it's either got to be improved, it's got to be cheaper, or it's got to be new or different. So if you're thinking of selling cashews or tomatoes or a well-known product into international markets, immediately you're competing with a whole wealth of other ingredient producers from different countries around the world. But Africa has so many unique ingredients that could and should be commercialized. And the analogy I tend to use is that if you went into your local supermarket, and I'm addressing here anyone that's listening in a westernized country, if you went into your local supermarket, you would see all sorts of ingredients and foodstuffs that you would never see in an average African market. They're just never seen because they're not imported. They're not known. They're purely made for the Western market. But the opposite is also true. If you go into a local market in West Africa, you will come across seeds, herbs, spices, fruits, vegetables, legumes that you don't see in Western markets. And it's not because they're not tasty, and it's not because they're not nutritious, and it's not because they're not good for you. It's just simply that people don't know about them and they've never been exported. They might be exported to, you know, local diaspora shops, but they're not exported in any great quantity at all. And that is a real market opportunity for Africa. There's a huge volume of ingredients there, which, if they were commercialized, could create, number one, economic development, incomes for people, but also the social and the environmental impact that comes with that. Coupled with all of these ingredients is that we are in what's called a wellness boom. When we started Aduna back in 2012, and we were just focused in on baobab, and that was it. I wasn't even aware of the word superfood. That just didn't seem to be in the lexicon. And then suddenly superfoods over the past 10 years or so has just become a category in its own right, in that you can actually walk into a health food store these days and there's a superfood aisle with all these various different ingredients from all around the world, which were simply not available 10 or 12 years ago. It's remarkable how it's taken off. And with this wellness boom, there's become a whole raft of new small businesses exploring these various different ingredients and making them available to an industry which previously didn't exist, or certainly didn't exist on the scale it is today. I don't have the numbers for fonio, so for the grains category, but for the dietary supplement category, which is the one that we're in with products like baobab and moringa powder, currently it's a $167 billion market, and that's going up to $240 billion by 2028. I mean, obviously huge numbers encompassing all sorts of various different products, some of which of course will have already been on the market. But it just illustrates that there's this huge interest in new ingredients and new products, particularly those that have got health credentials such as baobab and fonio. And then we have what I call the new consumer, which is an aware consumer, a conscious consumer. Far more than ever before, consumers are demanding to understand traceability. They want to know where their products come from. They're actively avoiding food corp, you know, the large food corporations that many of us grew up with. They're also interested in traceability and social and environmental impact. And there's an awful lot of boxes there that African ingredients and African companies can tick. The new consumer is far more aware, far more approachable, far more curious in wanting to try a lot of these ingredients. And from a company's perspective as well, so this is from looking at perhaps larger companies who could be buyers and could be importers, they've cottoned on to this trend. They're very conscious of the consumers that they're wanting to service. They're keen to show off their own sustainability credentials. They're keen to evidence where their ingredients come from and to be able to tell the stories behind that. And again, with products like ingredients like fonio, like baobab, there's fantastic stories to be told of the communities, the environments, how the harvesting occurs. Big stories there that people can latch onto. So you combine the wellness boom with the new consumers' approachability to these ingredients, with the wealth of different ingredients that are out there, and it does present a fantastic opportunity for Africa if it can be grasped. There is a reality, though, that for the very largest opportunities from the very largest companies, so now I'm talking about people like Kellogg's, Mondelez, Danone, Unilever, Nestle, etc., transacting at scale with small-scale producers in Africa, there is a big gap. There is a big challenge there. The hurdles are high in supplying these large companies, and small-scale producers just aren't really geared up to be able to to get over that challenge. And so from the Aduna perspective, we engage on what we call unconventional partnerships. And this is a recognition that the buyer-seller model, in other words, I've got a product, here it is, this is what the cost is, do you want to buy it? Which is the way that the world works effectively, is much tougher in the African context, because the relationship isn't there between the buyer and the seller, and that it needs a new way, a different way of working, particularly for small scale producers in the harder African countries to engage with, to be able to actually make it work. So this unconventional partnership approach means that rather than being a buyer, we work alongside the producer. And this is what we've done in northern Ghana and Burkina now for the past 10 years or so. So we work very closely with the grassroots NGO, and rather than buying from them directly, we finance the operation. So we have to raise donor funding every year, which then allows us to be able to create a budget to be able to then work with our NGO partner to be able to harvest and to process the baobab fruit. We look after the financing, the marketing, the sales, the logistics, the promotion, the quality control aspects, making sure that the ingredient is exactly as it needs to be for Western markets, and our partner in West Africa focuses in on the ground activities, the harvesting, the relationships with the communities, the paying of the communities, the transportation, the processing, and so on and so forth. And we started out 2014 using this approach, just producing about 5 or 10 tons of fruit, and I think I mentioned earlier, we're now processing between 1,000, 1,500 tons of baobab and exporting it all over the world. So I could go into that in a lot more detail, but it's just illustrating that there are different ways of approaching the buyer-seller relationship, and for us and for our partner, it's worked very well as we attempt to make baobab famous and popularized around the world. The last thing I'll just finish up is that the sustainability of these sorts of projects, really, that the word sustainability ought to mean something that lasts, that actually isn't a project per se that just goes on for 3 years and then stops, and everyone goes off and does something else. Sustainability is really about something that's repeatable, something that goes on continually, something whereby, particularly from the on the ground context, as far as harvesters are concerned, that it isn't just a one-off, that every year it's repeated and the supply chain grows on a continual basis. I could probably waffle on about a lot more. I think I should stop there. Happy to take any questions that anybody might have. Thank you very much for your time.
Excellent. Thank you so very much, Nick. Super. Thank you so very much for sharing. There's just some really remarkable insights that came out there. And I think, I particularly am intrigued by this notion of the interconnectivity of the value chain and how often we focus on the supply chain and not really on market demand. I think we've got one really powerful question from the chat, which is, how can we create stronger partnerships so that the suppliers in Africa, donors, and then importers are actually working on market demand? Do you perhaps have any insights on that?
I think it's really accepting from the outset that there needs to be a connectivity between the buyers in the West, as it is the West generally, and those producers that are working on the ground. There are organizations, Sense is one of them, around creating those connections and actively working with both parties. And it's almost like a matchmaking exercise in many ways. Much of it is awareness. I think I mentioned the donor community earlier on, but I think there is more activity that could go on in driving awareness of these sorts of companies and creating these sorts of partnerships and bonds between potential buyers and sellers in the first place. There's more visibility that's needed. There is more promotion and promotional work of the ingredients themselves, particularly the underutilized ones. But it does work once you get it going. We were the first company to export baobab from Africa into Western markets, and once upon a time at the very beginning we thought we had a monopoly, but that didn't last very long at all, because as soon as one company does it, another company says, oh, hold on, well, we can do that too. And now, of course, there's a whole baobab industry with multiple producers from all sorts of different African countries. So once you get that ball rolling, then the opportunities start to come through. But it does need some catalysts to be able to get it going in the first place.
Absolutely. I just think now we're doing some work with dried pineapple exporters in Benin, and they face a similar issue. It's a fantastic product, but when you do consumer research in Europe, no one knows what you're talking about. And then I contrast that with another piece of work I did in avocado, and you can see how those avocado suppliers have banded together. They have their own industry. They've got their own representation and marketing campaigns happening in retail stores. And then we can see how avocado consumption has just ratcheted up across the EU.
Yeah.
I think that we've got success stories, but we can also see how financing is required and really skilled personnel are needed to be able to work on market demand.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. So I was also quite intrigued by this notion of the two gaps that you express, this finance gap and then a scale gap. And that you've now filled in that gap by your unconventional partnerships, which I think is just remarkable. I'm sure every African in the call has got alarm bells going off, oh, we're giving financing to farmers. There must be a lot of risk involved. So tell me, how are you as a company managing the risk that comes with extending finance to actors in the value chain? How are you reconciling that within your business model?
Well, the most important, not the most important, one of the most important aspects of this is the ability to be able to underwrite the demand in the first place. So the big advantage of working on this unconventional partnership model, as far as the producer is concerned, is that what we're not doing is simply going to producer saying, here's the money, here's the wherewithal and the knowledge to be able to produce 50 tons of this, and then we'll try and find a buyer for it. A lot of the activity has to happen before that in the first place, and to get pre-commitments from buyers so that you know that you might not be selling everything, but you can sell a good proportion of what you do produce. If you know that you can get that business in the first place, then that makes it far more attractive to donors, because again, they know that any money that they are committing to us to be able to make these purchases and to be able to produce the ingredients in the first place is underwritten by the commitments from the buyers who are wanting to purchase. So everybody benefits in that environment. But it does mean that there's a lot of activity that has to happen on the sharp end to actually create that demand to start off with. And of course, that doesn't happen overnight. It's something that over the time we've done it has grown slowly and gradually, and over the years has increased. And as the years go by, you develop relationships and trust, and people get used to using your ingredients and the way you work, and so on and so forth. But by closing that loop, it makes for a far more secure and scalable value chain.
Well, I mean, it definitely sounds like a very mature perspective on the value chain, and I really admire the patience that you're applying as an individual and as a business. We've just got one more question that's currently in the chat, and I think that will be a wonderful segue to the next speaker, Olia. When you think about working with suppliers in Africa, and of course you yourself are also exporting, importing, but what do you think are the three most important things that an exporter should do to be able to market their products successfully and reliably in Europe?
The three things. I think the very first thing is the quality of the product that they're looking to market, and accepting that there is a realization that the quality standards and that the bar that's set for quality is probably going to be a lot higher in European markets than it is locally. So number one, you need to find out what those quality thresholds are, and whether it's the microbiology or the pesticides or the heavy metals or the way the ingredient is produced, etc. It's got to be something that is of a quality that is going to compete and be accepted in the markets in the first place. So that's the first thing. The second is getting an understanding of the overall landscape and the market that you're wanting to market your product into. In other words, if you're wanting to promote an ingredient that is already out there in the market, then straight away you're in a competitive environment, and you need to know what the products are selling for, what the market landscape looks like. Probably from an exporter perspective, but also from a distributor buyer perspective, and even from a consumer perspective, so that you can price your product competitively in the first place and make sure that your business model is viable. And then thirdly, I guess, is the knowledge around export markets themselves. It is most African producers, to kick off with, are usually simply producing for themselves or for their local market. That might then spin out to the national market. Maybe you're supplying into the capital city, and then you could get into cross-border trade as well. Excuse me. I wouldn't necessarily just go straight for the export markets. There can be huge markets available to you on the domestic side in the first place. But if you do decide to go into export markets, then you have got to make yourself as aware as possible of exactly what the requirements are. One little tip, the CBI in the Netherlands have a fantastic website which is very much geared up towards helping small-scale producers understand the market hurdles for entering US and European markets, and that can be very useful as a checklist of what to look out for and what to do for market readiness.
Yeah, indeed, that's a wonderful tip. In fact, it's my go-to first step. Even when I get asked to do a very complex study, that's an excellent starting point. So that's a great tip. Thank you very much. I think those are three of our top hits actually when we work with exporting companies. We often say quality, your marketing, market intelligence and understanding of what's needed, and then really know how to export. But let's see whether our next guest speaker agrees. We're about to make a bit of a shift by hearing a perspective from Olia Ouedraogo, who has joined us from Burkina Faso via a video presentation. It's a very short 10-minute presentation. She is the marketing manager for ABASF, an exporter of dried mango, and a participant in a CBI export promotion program. In fact, our company's been coaching her for the last 4 years, along with a number of other exporters. They are really a superstar in our program, and she's going to be sharing with us some of the key insights that she's had as she has grown their export business. So I'm going to hand over to our technical expert, Rochelle, who's going to get that video ready for sharing. Rochelle, over to you.
Hello everyone, my name is Olia Ouedraogo. I'm the marketing manager at ABASF company, and I'm very happy to share with you our market access challenges experiences. ABASF is a women association founded in 1995 with shea butter processing in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. In 2003, Royal Natural brand is created as an agribusiness, and our main product is organic dried mango. Our capacity of production is 150 tons per year. Our main goals are become a reference in mango drying in West Africa, create jobs to permit more women to live a decent life, stimulate the young to participate in agribusiness. Our challenges to become export ready were quite a lot. First of all, we took time to understand the export regulation and compliance, to do some market research in order to understand the consumer behavior, their preferences, and the competition. The product adaptation, adapting our product to meet the standards, the preference or legal requirements of foreign markets. Logistic and supply chain management. We took also the time to get a reliable partner for our logistic services. Financial challenges, managing costs associated with exporting, such as the production, the shipping, tariffs, currency fluctuation, because most buyers don't give prepayment at the first order, so you have to support all the cost of the production and the shipping by your own, so you need to be ready about that. Key focus areas. The most important aspects to focus on, it's very important to do market research first of all, and to understand the custom requirements and trade agreements in the market you want to penetrate. Product readiness. It's also important to update your product in order to meet the standards, like getting certification or modifying the packaging, the labeling. Operational capability. It's also important to have a reliable partner for the logistics services. Financial preparedness, I have already talked about it. It's very important to have the capability to support all the costs if the buyer is not if the buyers don't want to give you a prepayment for before the for the order. Sales and marketing strategies. It's also important to have a marketing department to take care of the sales and also to promote your company and your products. Building a knowledgeable team. It's also, everything is important. It's important to train the staff in export documentation and also to make them aware of the standards for the export market. Risk management. It's important to monitor geological risk in target markets. Establishing international partnership through trade show and business matching program in order to get your company on most of the buyers' database. Customer support and after sales service is very important to keep in touch with the buyer if after shipping the goods in order to get the feedback and continue to ensure a good after sale services. Internal changes we implemented to meet international standards. We get the EU trade registration number. We get certification like organic ABASF, and we are working on NOP. We train and develop continually our employees. We improve processes by buying performance dryers, metal detector, and workers training as well. We increase our production capacity by new dryers, cold room. We establish internal audit mechanism in order to make sure our system is efficient. We establish key performance indicator to track compliance efforts, and we regularly review and update practices to adapt to changes in standard. Sales-oriented mindset. The sales-oriented mindset creates a culture where employees focus on delivering results, maintaining customer satisfaction, and continually seeking opportunities for growth. This mindset is not just for the sales team, it's essential for everybody in the company to have it in mind. And a sales-oriented mindset is not just about selling. It's about creating value, solving problems, and building trust to drive both short-term and long-term success. Even without it, even if you have the best organic dried mango or you have the best product, you may fail to reach your potential in the market. Steps I have taken to foster this. I took time to understand the value of sales for my company. It's important to produce, but it's very important also to be able to sell it. Setting personal sales goals, developing product and market knowledge, learning to listen customers actively and think solution, not product. It's important. Improving my communication skill by learning English, building resilience and staying motivated and proactive. I'm going to them. We can't just only wait for the buyer to come to us. We have to go to them and be very proactive. Investing in personal development and networking. Supporting growth. The impact of key partners on our export success. The main support we got was from the CBI program that really helped us these last 4 years. And we got the chance to learn about the export market through science and agri-dev services. We get expert analysis and advices, workshops, personal follow-up that was very important for us, participation at international salons such as BioFac, SIAL, connection with potential buyers where we get good contract, connection to dried fruit company from other countries to share experiences, market prospection trip in EU, creation of tools to improve the company productivity. Thank you, Michelle, for that. And learning from others' experiences. Lessons I would like to share with you Today is to take all the time you need to get ready. No need to rush. It's a marathon, so you have to get all the information before going into the export market. Be patient and resilient. To get a contract, it may take 1 to 3 years, so you have to be patient through the process. Find the perfect partner to guide you during the process. It's very important to have some expert to guide you. Have a clear plan is also important. You need to know where you are going and where you want to be like in 5 or 10 years, so it's easier to set your goals to get there. Marketing department is important. If you don't have one, you need to get one. Hire, if needed, the right person to the right place. Thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to receive your comments or questions through my email or my WhatsApp contacts, or for any different information, just keep in touch with me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So thank you so very much, Olia, for that wonderful presentation and for joining us today. It's an extra gift. We have an opportunity to take questions. If you have any questions, please place them in the chat. And at the moment, I see that we have 2 very interesting questions. So Olia, here we go. We have one observation first, that most companies in Francophone Africa consider sales an activity that the owner does alongside everything else they do. That the owner makes all the decisions, such as pricing, and wants to do all the international travel, but often they're not skilled at marketing and sales. So the question from the panelist is, from the participant is, what happened in your company that made you realize that this should be done differently, that you needed a dedicated English salesperson with a marketing budget? So what made you realize that this needed to change?
Okay, thank you. I think at ABASF, the thing is that the owner or the CEO she's getting older, so she's not physically and mentally able to do all the trips or to take care of everything. And most of the time when she gets in touch with a buyer, they are speaking English, and it's difficult for her to get any contract because of the barrier of the language. So she think about why not getting someone especially for this department to take care of it. And I was there, and I asked to give them my services in that side. And she was at the beginning, she was not really open, because most of the owner, they are not confident to give this type of what can I say, side of the business to someone else. But I'm glad she was happy with that proposal, and I think she understands the impact of this department in the company.
Super. Yes, thank you so very much, Olia. That makes an awful lot of sense. And I think you raise just such an important point, that the owner needs to have some sort of internal realization so that they can empower others. And I think often as donor programs, we focus on technical skills and not helping owners come to the realization that they need to change. So thank you for introducing that. We have one more comment and query. first of all, that this is quite an impressive experience. How did you manage to push the employees and especially middle management to change their mindset?
Okay, it wasn't easy because people they don't like changes. So it was very important to make them understand that we want to go in a other level of the business. And for that, we need to change our mindset if we want to stay competitive in the market. And the local market is very different from the international market. So we took all the necessary time to speak to them, to make them understand what is the next level of the company where we want to go. So I think it's a gain thing, because if the company grow, they are growing also, they are getting a better salary, and we are more open to help more people. And I think we use all the things to make them align to our new vision.
Really insightful. And I think this change management process, I think we often forget that everyone in the organization has to go through change. It's a topic we touched on in our previous webinar, where we introduced you the concept of the 4 ants, so that some people in a change management process are reliant. So they're really reliably going to go along with you. They're going to take it up and become champions for the change. That some people will be compliant. They will do it because you said so. But that you're inevitably going to have some people who are resistance, so they resist the change, and another bunch who are going to be defiant and are going to try and undo the change. So I think what you've really just brought to mind again is how you need to look at all of these different audiences and create a win-win for them so that they can buy into the idea and come along with it. So thank you so very much to Olia for joining us on the call. Olia, please hang around in case there's some further questions. I would just like to remind everyone that if you do have questions for either Nick or Olia, it would be wonderful if you could put that in the chat, and we'll return to them as we progress. For now, we have an opportunity to move on to the very next section of our presentation. Goodbye, Olia, for now, where we're going to turn to Tessa Niemak, who has been implementing various projects for Sense, including as Africa's first rice milling business academy, and now has been leading the implementation project around developing a food safety processing desk in Malawi. So welcome, Tessa. Tessa, I of course have several questions for you. Perhaps you would like to say something about yourself or your experience or about the call so far?
Yes, so I think from my background, I am in marketing and communications, so that's really as well as being my background, it's also a big passion that I have. So in this particular project on Burkina Faso, just talking to the companies about some of the challenges, a lot of that does link to marketing and communications, and it's not necessarily only, okay, let's talk about product, price, place, etc. But it's really things such as sales orientation and, having a qualified and experienced sales team or marketing team, etc. So I found it very, very interesting. So I'm just here to share that experience.
Wonderful. Well, welcome. I think a very good place to start is, what I found quite intriguing about the 2 previous presentations was this notion that, yes, of course, there's all the sales and marketing with the market demand components, but it seems that there's a lot of internal change that needs to happen in companies. So in your work in supporting companies, I'm quite curious to know what internal challenges did you observe are preventing companies from being export ready?
Okay, so I think someone did mention it in the chat, but that whole concept of that we're working with entrepreneurs, and they often very dynamic, but that often comes with them being overburdened. So they try and manage at least the entire process. And what ends up happening is that often when they interact with companies, and let's say, for instance, there's a request for a quotation, there's delays in the quotation coming through. That, I think, is there's many reasons for that. One is because they are overburdened and therefore don't get to it on time. But also there's a challenge that they haven't necessarily empowered their team to have direct control over the areas that they work in. So a simple question, who is managing this sales process? Is there a salesperson that works in that company? Are they empowered to make decisions? Do they know what their cost is so that they can then determine what the price is? So I think that's a key challenge. I think, like I said before, in terms of experiences within the sales team, Olia mentioned it very well. The owner of ABASF realized that they needed a dedicated marketing person who speaks English. And then that person is really experienced and then can help to drive the growth, or can help to work on the sales team or the marketing team, etc. I think something which does impact some of the challenges in terms of exporting is that there's this unpredictability of raw materials supply. And often what happens is when they need to make decisions about what their price is going to be, there tends to be a trend to inflating that price, which inevitably makes them uncompetitive. And so, there needs to be an understanding of what is the market, who are the competitors, what is the pricing within that market, and how do we work with that risk to get to a competitive price. So I think that part about like almost working with or not really understanding or maybe not putting enough focus on strategic pricing and, growing what does it mean to grow the company, or what does it mean to invest in innovation? That sometimes is a challenge. And I think that talks to potentially something which you said, Kerry, around, who is this entrepreneur and what is their appetite for growth and for, empowering their staff, etc.
Yeah, I think that you raised some really interesting points, and I loved how Nick had spoken earlier about the entire value chain being connected. And we can see that within the companies on a micro level, their sales are affected by what's happening in the company, the make, whether they've got good control over quality and processes, and then do they have good understanding of their sourcing? So that source, make, sell really is also an interconnected chain, and how then the very personal issues, the entrepreneur mindset, whether you've got skilled people in the business, how that all affects your success at being able to access markets.
Yeah.
So now that we're quite clear about what's challenging in these businesses, I wonder what types of support have you found have been most effective in helping these companies become market ready?
Okay, so I think I'll talk about what a lot of companies do when they provide support, and that's often on technical expertise. And I absolutely agree there is a lot of support that's needed on technical support. So that can be via, and this is something that Sense does, is we provide training programs, sales and marketing courses, the basics of sales and marketing, but then also how to do a cost price calculation, some very practical things of how to actually pack a container. These are things that we do and that we can do, and that's all around technical expertise. Then there is the support that's needed in terms of changing systems. So, what is happening within your business from a HR perspective? Are they skilled employees there, etc.? And that we also have done. We've done business coaching on, how can we assist with leading, with assisting you with what's your leadership vision, what is happening within the organization, etc. But one of the things that I think we're starting to learn more and more about is almost this idea of entrepreneurial mindset. So like, how do you as a leader kind of drive your business forward? Or like, you know, how do you kind of change it from just being, I need to make sure that this product is running in the line, to how do I grow the business? What kind of inspirational ideas or visions do I have for this business? And so there's something there around moving from this hard skills, do the marketing, hire an English employee, to the soft skills. How do I lead? How do I empower my staff, etc.? So there's kind of that change that we're moving through. And I think we're discovering more and more that there needs to be this balance, either through business coaching or through training, yeah, etc.
And I can definitely see how that all plays out. I think it's quite, this duality. And I think, for me, one of the hardest hitting illustrations of that happened earlier this week when I was speaking to a fund manager, and they kept on reiterating, yes, there must be a good business plan, but there must also be a good entrepreneur. And I think we're getting closer and closer to understanding what a good entrepreneur looks like. And it's not necessarily the person that's charging out into the unknown. You need a little bit of that. But it's also the person who's thinking about developing systems, developing people, and is willing to take on risk and change. I think Olia was mentioning this idea of managing risk earlier. So, we are now clear about what companies might need. We know what support is very helpful to them. What advice would you give to donor programs and donor organizations as they design programs and work in this area of entrepreneurial development?
So I think, just following on from what I said before, that we've always been focused on the technical. So, provide farming training courses, or provide how to do marketing, or etc. And that is extremely important. However, there's almost a three-tiered approach. The one is the providing the technical skills, and then that can be through training programs or business coaching, etc. Then it's around what systems can you set up. So how are your staff? What is your staff like? What's the sales process like? What's the operations process like, etc., which can be quite tedious, but it's extremely important. And then, of course, this working with the entrepreneur, and like, what is the entrepreneurial why? Why do they do it? And what is it that they want to achieve? And that, I don't think it's very clear. But I think we kind of need to find a way to kind of crack these three elements. Yeah, so I think that would be the three things that I would look at as a donor program. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite powerful, these three different areas: entrepreneurial mindset, the technical skills, and then business processes. That does seem quite sensible. And when I cast my mind back to my experience in large international organizations, or when I was coaching these international businesses, in a sense, those are the three areas they were focusing on, right? Deliver what we can do. We must technically be able to deliver it. We need the systems and the processes to be able to do that reliably. And then we need to invest in our people. We need to make sure they understand why we're doing what we're doing, and that they're developing a culture of entrepreneurship. And I think, as Olia mentioned, the sales-oriented mindset, which is more than selling, it's also learning how to deliver. Yeah. So that's really powerful. Great. Thank you very much, Tessa. I think it's an opportunity for us to take questions from the participants now. I don't see anything popping up in the chat spontaneously. Perhaps we've covered all of the major questions already. Any questions? Excellent. This is quite an interesting one. It might apply to all of the panelists. What was your perfect failure which helped you to learn a lot in this area?
So, I mean, let me think. So one of the things that actually happened recently was, we talk about it a lot. So, there's a lot of seasonal changes that happen. At some point, we were trying to sell dried ginger. We had not, in the 4-year project, managed to sell dried ginger. And in the last 6 months of the project, we actually got a interested buyer to buy dried ginger, and we got 2 suppliers to send them. And unfortunately, to this day, one of the containers has not left Burkina Faso. I'm like, oh no, you're kidding me. So it doesn't matter sometimes what it is that you do. You can sit with them on the phone and you can say, this is your cost. Tell us what you're buying the ginger for. Tell us, what is it that you need? I'm gonna send an expert to you to go and pack this container for you. And I will be your English speaking salesperson, and sometimes it's just not enough. So at some point, you have to let go. Companies have to be able to, take the opportunity and run with it, because it's their company, and there's only so much you can do. So as consultants, you can give what you can give, but ultimately, let them manage their company, yeah.
Exactly. I think for sustainable businesses, they absolutely have to be able to run on their own. We can perhaps give them a little bit of fuel for the tank, but they have to have their own car. They have to get it in working order.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Tessa. And perhaps, Olia, would you like to share from your experience what has been a perfect failure, which helped you learn a lot?
I don't know. Perfect failure. Maybe discussing the contract late, I think, because it's a long process and the time to get the contract done, we were at the end of the season, so we weren't able to fulfill it. So I think last December, November, I started talking to the potential buyer in order to make everything ready before the next season. And also about the logistic partner. For last year, we get one, but I think we are now looking for another one, because he took the container and the container was at the port for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and we didn't get any information for our buyers, and it was very uncomfortable for every part of the business. So it wasn't easy, but we managed to get everything done. And I think we need to have at least 2 or 3 reliable partnerships for the logistic part.
Super. Thank you, Olia. I think you're just reminding us, that in a business, you have to keep learning and keep getting better. And for me, I think what you've also reminded me of is this idea that as business managers or business owners or leaders in a company, one of our biggest roles is fixing problems. There will always be problems. And so I can see why you kept on talking about this patience and resilience. Without that patience and resilience, you can't keep solving problems. So thank you very much for sharing that insight. Nick, perhaps you want to share with us, your perfect failure.
Perfect failure. Well, you've got to have perfect failures because that's how you learn. I think one of the biggest challenges for us has always been around the balance between supply and demand. And I can give 2 examples of that, both extremes. One was a few years ago. This relates to Baobab, when a particular customer in the US placed a significant order with us. And this was in advance of production, which is just the way you want it to be, which was very exciting. So that meant that we had to go and do some additional fundraising because of all the costs involved. It meant sourcing from new communities that we hadn't sourced from previously. So these were communities that were not even connected into the global supply chain previously. That involves the process of, you know, education and the forming of cooperatives and organic certification and all these complexities, just so that we could harvest enough fruit to be able to satisfy this particular customer's requirements. But we did all that, and we harvested the fruit and we processed it all successfully, and we successfully exported it, and we got paid for it, and everybody was happy, except for the fact that that company then went bust about 6 months afterwards. And you think, well, why is that an issue? You know, everybody's got the money, everybody's happy with the way that things have worked, but the main issue is around this sustainability question, in that, you know, you've spent all this time and effort training and educating and cooperative forming and so on, and probably more than anything, motivating and getting these communities excited that, look, there's a new revenue stream that's going to come into your community, and then the rug gets pulled out from underneath you, and that's it. There's no more. We can't come back next year, and everybody gets very despondent, and they have to go back to whatever it was they were doing previously, and the down is as big as the high in that respect. So that's one extreme where, you know, forecasting and management becomes very, very important. And then the flip side of that was actually last year's harvest at the beginning of 2024, which, because of climate change, was appalling for most tree crops across West Africa, most noticeably in cocoa. The cocoa prices rocketed because of the lack of availability of fruit, and that affected us as well. And suddenly we were in the opposite situation of having high demand but not having enough raw material to be able to satisfy the demand. And what that really underwrote for us is the importance of risk management and contingency planning, and actually not being wholly reliant on one supply chain, but having 2 or 3 supply chains, probably in different parts of the continent, so that if something negative happens in one part of the world, and that could be climatic, that could be security risks, that could be exchange rates, there's all sorts of things that can happen. You've got a contingency somewhere else to be able to counter for that. So I don't know if they were failures or not. They were certainly frustrations, and they were wake-up calls that these were extremities that we will probably happen again in the future, and that we would you know, need to make allowances and plan for.
Oh, you've just touched on one of my most exciting topics, actually, this idea of risk management. You know, I'm in the process of designing a course which is very specifically around managing risks in business and looking at climate change and how that creates instability in your business. And I think it's just from this notion that business, by its very definition, if you're in a dynamic, moving market, which is where the growth is, that's where the revenue is, there are also going to be unexpected events. And in your supply chain, because we're in agriculture, there are going to be unexpected events. So this notion of recognizing that the rewards come because you're managing risk. And if you manage that risk well, you can make it tolerable for yourself. So you can sleep at night, that you can supply your customers, that you can make sure you're not letting these communities down in the longer run. So thank you very much for sharing that. Great, I'm just going to turn quickly to the chat. I think we've got a comment from a development practitioner. I think it relates to this idea that there are perfect failures, and that some companies you're just not able to help, some communities you're perhaps not able to help. And, you know, there's this observation that there is this idea of 1/3. 1/3 of the companies you coach will fly. 1/3 will make small changes. They might just putter along at a slow rate. And there's another third that will not move, that there's actually very little you'll be able to do with them because the entrepreneur themselves or the management team is not ready to make the necessary changes. So thank you very much to Michiel. That's our managing director who's popped in that thought. I think from many miles in coaching, he's learned that you just have to sometimes accept that you yourself are human. Great, that brings us to the end, I think, of the session today. We're not going to prolong it anymore because we really have had so very many lessons coming out of it. I think what some of the highlights for me was definitely this notion of an interconnected value chain and how essential it is for us to be paying attention to what's happening in the market, perhaps working together to be able to stimulate demand so that we can avoid the situation where, you know, we are not actually able to get rid of the product that's being produced from in the supply chain. We also touched on this notion of being able to change perceptions of African businesses. And I think not in a way that is soft and fluffy. You know, sometimes people talk about developing a brand, but really doing it in a hard, tangible way, addressing product standards, looking at food safety standards, making sure we understand the market, that we are addressing the needs of the market. And then finally, once we've got that in place, really thinking about how we can create food businesses rather than just people who are in the agricultural value chain. You know, so helping them to become skilled practitioners who are reliably bringing raw materials to market. We spoke about this need to close a couple of gaps, a financing gap to make sure that we can get the flywheel moving in the supply chain, but also making sure that we can scale up so that we can perhaps be able to supply some of these larger buyers. Not necessarily not necessarily at the scale of Unilever, but really being able to grow as market demand grows. We touched on this very exciting idea of unconventional partnerships as one idea of being able to, you know, develop the supply chain, needing to do that with patience, and making sure we do that in a very sustainable way. So knowing that whatever we're getting grown in the developing world, that there is a market that needs to be supplied and that demand and supply are balanced. We then touched on a number of things that exporters can do to be ready for export and to succeed in the export market. Things like achieving quality standards, really understanding how to export products, whether that is in developing very reliable partnerships with logistics companies or just understanding the regulations that you need to achieve. And then finally, knowing how to market your product. We, thanks to Olia, were also introduced to this idea of a sales-oriented mindset and how that mindset needs to drive more than just the selling moment. How being able to sell reliably means setting up your business operations so that you can fulfill those orders reliably. That is a marathon and not a sprint, and that marathon requires patience and resilience. It also requires a willing entrepreneur, willing to delegate to their team, willing to work as a team rather than as an individual. And that people don't necessarily like that change, that we're going to need to take them on a change management process, potentially using our 4-ant analogy. Finally, we segued into what that means for us as development practitioners, how important it is for us to think about businesses in their totality and value chains in their totality. So how do we stimulate demand as well as stimulating supply? And then within those businesses, how do we make sure those businesses are able to sell, to make, and to source in a very reliable fashion? These will require lots of different attitudinal and systems changes, but very importantly that we focus on developing technical skill, that we focus on developing business processes and systems to be able to replicate the good work we're doing, and that we are working with entrepreneurs to develop their capacity and their aptitude and willingness to change and lead change in their businesses. As we close, I would just like to remind you all that, you know, a strong market, when you operate in a strong market, you tend to have good times. When you operate in a weak market, you tend to have tough times. So being able to access lucrative markets is so key. We've heard that it's not as simple as bringing a great product to market and making a deal, that sustainable businesses need to develop sustainable systems so that they're able to reliably attract and find good buyers, and that they can make those deals time after time. We need to support technical skills acquisition, good governance. We need to look at systems development and developing good leaders in these organizations. And I'm starting to believe more and more in developing strong partnerships so that we're all working along that value chain. Now, this might be a challenge to you as perhaps a buyer if you're on the call, thinking, should I just be buying products and selling it and not be worried about the supply chain? Or it might be challenging you if you are in that supply chain, thinking to yourself, why do I have to worry about the market? Or as a donor practitioner, if you're thinking to yourself, did I really think we needed to be working on market demand? Well, if we're going to respect the idea of value chains, and that value chains need to be built slowly and in a stepwise fashion, then we probably also need to be thinking about our role in the overarching value chain and how we can create these very important linkages. If you would like to learn more about this topic, particularly if you'd like to learn about how we are bringing these skills to Africa, how we are changing how we design programs to support companies, please do reach out to us. We've got a very exciting learner management system that enables us to reach more people at a lower cost per contact. We're developing new methodologies, blended learning methodologies, developing lots more tools to facilitate it. Reach out to us. We're always happy to share. Reach out to info@timeforsense.com. And in the follow-up to this, we'll be sharing lots of different case studies, which might help you to learn some new tips and tricks for how other companies are succeeding in this program. Finally, as we close, I would like to thank our very important panelists. Without you, this wouldn't have been possible. To Nick, Olia, and Tessa, thank you for being so generous with your knowledge. I have learned a fair deal, and I've been in this game for quite a while. So thank you for volunteering your time. To both Olia and Nick, it's not our first time reaching out to you, and we are just so grateful that you consistently give back in this field. We'd like to also thank some of the donors who've been participating by providing funding. So to the Netherlands, the Embassy of the Netherlands in Burkina Faso, who funded Burkina DryMore, to CBI, who've made such a dramatic contribution to being able to exporting companies and to many of the programs we are working on. Thank you for your continued support. I would also like to congratulate Olia, who participated in this session in English. It was made possible by her participation in that CBI program, which connected her to a Ghanaian company and hosted her for an internship. So our practical interventions definitely do bear fruit. And then finally, to all of you who've joined as guests, I see that as time has been progressing, we're getting more and more participants. And so I just want to say thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing your insights and your questions. This conversation will continue. Please join us again in future. If you'd like more information, there are quite a few links in the chat. Take the opportunity to just click in there. You can see some of our solutions. We developed loads of materials around the series. There are videos of the 2 additional calls that we had, 2 additional webinars. We've got working papers from which you might be able to learn. And of course, you're welcome to pick our brain in the future. So that is that, guys. Thanks to all of you. And I hope that we will see you again at another series later on in the year. Be well and all the best for your business.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.